All right, I'm starting off with in the room. So, in the room over Mr. Charrington's shop, when they could get there, Julie and Winston lay side by side on a stripped bed under the open window, naked for the sake of coolness. The rat had never come back, but the bugs had multiplied hideously in the heat. It did not seem to matter. Dirty or clean, the room was paradise. As soon as they arrived, they would sprinkle everything with pepper bought on the black market, tear off their clothes, and make love with sweating bodies, then fall asleep and wake to find that the bugs had rallied and were massing for the counterattack. Gross. 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day. Sorry. 4, 5, 6, 7 times they met during the month of June. Not per day. Winston had dropped the habit of drinking gin at all hours. He seemed to have lost the need for it. He had grown fatter, his varicose ulcer had subsided, leaving only a brown stain on the skin above his ankle. His fits of coughing in the early morning had stopped. The process of life had ceased to be intolerable. He had no longer any impulse to make faces at the telescreen or shout curses at the top of his voice. Now that they had a secure hiding place, almost a home, it did not even seem a hardship that they could only meet infrequently and for a couple of hours at a time. What mattered was that the room over the junk shop should exist. To know that it was there, in Violet, was almost the same as being in it. The room was a world, a pocket of the past where extinct animals could walk. Mr. Charrington, thought Winston, was another extinct animal. He usually stopped to talk with Mr. Charrington for a few minutes on his way upstairs. The old man seemed seldom or never to go out of doors, and on the other hand to have almost no customers. I wonder why. He led a ghost-like existence between the tiny, dark shop and an even tinier back kitchen, where he prepared his meals and which contained, among other things, an unbelievably ancient gramophone with an enormous horn. He seemed glad of the opportunity to talk. Wandering about among his worthless stock with his long nose and thick spectacles and his bowed shoulders in the velvet jacket, he had always vaguely the air of being a collector rather than a tradesman. I'm going to stop there because we have to talk about two things. First of all, Winston says that he no longer needs gin, that his varicose ulcer has subsided, and he doesn't feel the need to scream and shout at the telescreen anymore. So I know when we first started reading the book, we had a conversation about why the party would encourage people to drink gin. Like, they have gin at their jobs, they drink gin at home, they drink it at their community events all the time. And they're smoking, and so they're like addicted to these items. And we talked about why the party would want and encourage this behavior. And I think, if I remember correctly, what we decided is the party would especially encourage you to drink gin because they want you to remain docile. And when you're drinking all the time, you're less likely to have these kind of unorthodox thoughts, right? You are more likely to agree with whatever the party says because you're drunk. And we also talked about why would they forbid relationships. Well, we just heard recently in the last couple of days that we were reading that Winston and Julia have kind of like a different idea of why the party forbids sex and sexual relationships. And Julia believes more that the party does this to kind of build up that pent-up emotions, so that when they say, oh, well, you can't have sex, you can't feel these things for other people, you can't have these romantic relationships, but what you can do is you can hate and scream at Goldstein and blame him for everything. People are more likely to do that because they have all this pent-up energy because they're not allowed to be with somebody in a romantic way. So now Winston is threatening the party because he is totally fine now. Like, he has this relationship with Julia and he doesn't feel the need to drink because he is just satisfied with the relationship. And it's really bad for the party, right? They don't want people to do that. They really, really want people to be angry all the time and to be drinking all the time. So Winston is kind of showing us exactly why the party put these rules in place, because he is acting out exactly what the party feared, that they would be just kind of chill and they don't really care anymore because they're having a relationship. Second, we need to talk about Mr. Charrington, and specifically that last sentence where it says that he had the air of being a collector rather than a tradesman. And we all now know that Mr. Charrington is not a nice guy. And we have to think about that collector word. Who is he collecting? What is he collecting? He's not collecting antiques. He's collecting people, right? I mean, we could probably assume that Winston's not going to be his first victim. He's probably done this before. If it's not like at Mr. Charrington's shop, like he might have been a thought police member for a really long time, and he probably has done this before. So he's not a collector of antiques. He's a collector of people. But it's really interesting that Winston would use that word, collector, and not realize what it means. Right? Okay, I'm moving on. With a sort of faded enthusiasm, he would finger the scrap of rubbish or that, a china bottle stopper, the painted lid of a broken snuff box, a pinchbeck locket containing a strand of some long-dead baby's hair, never asking that Winston should buy it, merely that he should admire it. To talk to him was like listening to the tinkling of a worn-out musical box. He had dragged out from the corners of his memory some more fragments of forgotten rhymes. There was one about 4 and 20 blackbirds. 4 and 20 equals 24. They're just saying it weird. And another about a cow with a crumpled horn, and another about the death of poor Cock Robin. It just occurred to me that you might be interested, he would say, with a deprecating little laugh, whenever he produced a new fragment, but he could never recall more than a few lines of any one rhyme. Why would Mr. Charrington keep bringing up these rhymes that he can't finish? We know that Winston really enjoys hearing these rhymes and he's really intrigued by it. So what does Mr. Charrington have to gain from introducing all of these new rhymes and not telling Winston the ending? That's something to think about. And if you have any ideas, put it in the comments and we'll talk about it. Both of them knew, in a way, it was never out of their minds that what was now happening could not last long. There were times when the fact of impending death seemed as palpable as the bed they lay on, and they would cling together with a sort of despairing sensuality, like a damned soul grasping at his last morsel of pleasure when the clock is within 5 minutes of striking. But there were also times when they had the illusion not only of safety, but of permanence. So long as they were actually in this room, they both felt no harm could come to them. Getting there was difficult and dangerous, but the room itself was sanctuary. It was as when Winston had gazed into the heart of the paperweight with the feeling that it would be possible to get inside that glassy world, and that once inside it, time could be arrested. Often they gave themselves up to daydreams of escape. Their luck would hold indefinitely, and they would carry on their intrigue, just like this, for the remainder of their natural lives. Or Catherine would die, and by subtle maneuverings, Winston and Julia would succeed in getting married. Do they succeed in getting married? No. Or they would commit suicide together. Or they would disappear, alter themselves out of recognition, learn to speak with proletarian accents, get jobs in a factory, and live out their lives undetected in a back street. It was all nonsense, as they both knew. In reality, there was no escape. Even the one plan that was practicable, suicide, they had no intention of carrying out. To hang on from day to day and from week to week, spinning out a present that had no future, seemed an unconquerable instinct, just as one's lungs will always draw the next breath so long as there is air available.